Hello YouTube. Once there lived a very interesting woman, and this woman shocked her enemies and delighted her friends. She was a nun, and she was executed as a witch. Long before the discovery of penicillin by Europeans, she had already used its properties. Well, ethnic Russians, Erzya and Mokshan ethnicities divide Alena of Arzamas, and sometimes very hotly, among themselves, among the three people, the Russians, the Erzya and the Mokshans. Now, the latter two, for Russians, they usually merge them into one single Moldovan ethnos. After all, Alena was born in Erzya and Moksha places, but in a Kazakh family. She led the Russians in an uprising, yes, but she also led the Mordvins in it. And most importantly, it has entered the legends of several people. How can a native legend like her be of non-native blood? So they feud. In any case, Alena was born in a Kazakh family near the Moldovan city of Arzamas. Her life began, like usually for a woman there at that time, in field and domestic labor. And she was already the first girl in work, meaning she worked very hard. That's why her husband, rich but old, married her. In vain, of course. Soon after the wedding, he broke down at work and died. Either he was trying to keep up with his wife, or, as they sometimes joked, when the girl is young and vigorous, how long will the old husband last? Alena did not like it to be in the marriage, and so, having been widowed, she did not wait for new suitors, but left to build a career of sorts. In those times, in Russia, it was possible only in one way, in a monastery. Alena became a nun and took the veil, so to say. She became Alena, to be precise, only after that. And what name she was baptized with at birth, that's forever lost. So her career has been set. In the monastery, they learned not only to pray, but also to read, write, and about medicine, because nuns should help people who suffer. So in the Alena's monastery, they helped with herbs and prayer. They did not see any medicine in this, because God's herbs is something that God sowed the earth with. So Alena soon learned the purpose of each stem and each leaf, and even added a special medicine, the blue bath malt. It was good to use to heal purulent wounds. But, taking the bath, there was a special prejudice among the peasantry, so they quietly whispered that the nun, though praying, was a witch. They talked about Alena a lot. She turned out to have a great talent for medicine. She put almost everyone back on their feet, from small children with their childhood sicknesses to old people with hernias and fractures. From the peasant labor to old age, many hernias came out, and the bones did not get stronger either. According to some legends, Alena spent 20 years in the monastery and would have lived there as much, or maybe longer, if not for Stenka Razin. Of the four great rebellions that Russia experienced between the years of 1600 and 1800, peasant wars, as some historians say, the one led by Stenka Razin has evoked the most popular feeling and memories. The free land along the Don River always attracted runaways from the southern and central areas of the Russian state. Here they were protected by the unwritten law. There is no extradition from the Don. The government needed the Kazakhs' service in the defense of the southern borders, and therefore had to put up with such self-government of the land, of the territories. The Don Kazakhs had some autonomy from the Russian state and resented any governmental interference in their affairs. They cherished freedom and independence, and at times fought to defend these privileges. The Kazakh class was subdivided into well-to-do and the poor. Stepan Timofeyevich Razin, also known as Stenka Razin, originated from the Zimoveyskaya Stanitsa, a Kazakh settlement, and was born to an old Kazakh family that lived on the Don River. His mother was said to be a captive Turkish woman. I understand that the Kazakhs there really like Turkish females and often married them. Razin's family status within the community often put him into situations that taught him to become a shrewd negotiator. He served his people with distinction and won their trust and respect. He was a born leader who understood the mood of the peasant class. His charisma drew people to him and influenced their behavior. Yet those who knew him described sudden mood swings, especially when he was drunk, and that led to violence. The most popular example is his legendary and memorized forever in a popular folk song, sacrifice of his mistress, a Persian princess, whom he threw into the Volga River for the sake of the Kazakh solidarity. The former river pirate Razin managed to unite under his banner thousands of Kazakhs and peasants, outraged by having their rights trampled by the nobles, elites, who became their main target of aggression. Every city that Stenka's troops took turned into an aristocratic bloodbath. Razin moved towards Moscow from southern Russia, taking city after city, and enlarged his army by offering freedom to each peasant who joined him. However, at the Battle of Simbirsk in 1670, the rebellion army was defeated and its leader fell into hands of government forces soon after. Razin was quartered. You know what I mean, right? What happened, what they did to his body. And thousands of his followers were so brutally executed that witnesses were deeply shocked. But let's go back to Alona. No, Stenka did not ruin the monastery. He led the rebellion, and Alona liked his political slogans, as they would be called now, so that she left the monastery, mounted a horse, and gathered a detachment of more than 300 men. So they followed her, a woman, because she was Alona, a convent dweller, Alona the nun, Alona a witch, and everyone knew her in the surrounding villages. And everyone marveled at her scholarship and luck. The others would die every other time, but with this luck she survived. Alona the nun put on her armor. Alona took a bow in her hands and led her army to occupy the city of Temnikov. And she conquered it and sat down in it to edit and send out fair letters, as we would call it today, propaganda. These letters set fire to the tales of the Tsar's warlords, because either Alona's oratorical gift came up, or she was so respected, or this brush would lack just one spark, and she gave it to them, so that the peasants rose up, Kazakhs rose up, and followed Stenka Razin. They robbed, they burned, they killed. But that was not the problem for the powers that be. The fact that the authorities on the ground were pinned down, that was the problem. When you push against the government in Russia, that's when the problems arise. Alona spent 2 months in Temnikov. By that time, 2,000 people had already come to her subordination, and then the Tsar's trained military people defeated her army. They've defeated Alona herself and moved in to take her. Those loyal to her fell first, and she ran into the church and shot arrows from there until she ran out of arrows. Well, she killed 7 enemy soldiers and wounded the 8th. According to some legends, she threw away the bow and fell before the altar, embracing it. 2 men dragged her away from this altar. They had to break out her fingers. She didn't have the strength to unclench them. They raised the bow, playfully tried to pull the string up to the ear like Alona did, but it didn't go. Then for a few days they spent playing with Alona's bow. They were measuring by force who and how could pull it. But Alona was sent to the rack, burned with a hot iron. And they say Alona never complained, never moaned. She spat in the eyes of the executioners, and that's all. In general, Alona turned out to be not a nun, but a witch, and they knew it for a long time. It is a common thing. Bath mold, dirt from a place where evil spirits like to walk. The authorities decided to burn Alona alive. They burned her like this. They didn't tie her to the post. Otherwise, some peasant, someone wouldn't be able to stand the sight of torment. They would regret it. They would scatter up the bonfire. So the local authorities put up like a log cabin with a lid. A person must enter inside, and the outsiders, the authorities, would set fire to the cabin from the outside. For this purpose, brushwood and straw lay around the log house. They placed it there. Alona entered the log house herself, stood on the edge for a while, crossed herself and jumped inside. And she slammed the lid behind her. They set Alona on fire and listened only to the crackling of the fire. Even dying, Alona did not scream. Out of her anger, she didn't shout, so that they, Tsar's people, would not take it into their heads to rejoice. Yeah, she was an evil woman to them, evil, and always the first in battle and the last to leave the battle. God knows how people loved such an evil woman, wondered the executioners, evil and fierce. Look at them. If Alona had a grave, if the Tsar's people had not scattered her ashes in the wind, they, peasants, people around, would still have gone to bow to the witch. The story of Alona of Arzamas was so unusual that it became widely known not only in Russia but also in Europe. The famous German historian of the 17th century, Johann Fisch, in his book described the execution of this woman in these words. A few days after Razin's execution, a nun was burned who, being at the same time with him like an Amazon, surpassed men with her unusual courage. Her courage was also manifested during the execution, when she calmly ascended to the edge of a log house built by, according to the Moscow custom, made of wood, straw, and other combustible things. And having crossed herself and performed other rituals, boldly jumped into it, slammed the lid behind her, and when everything was engulfed in flames, did not make a sound. Despite the fact that very little is known about Alona of Arzamas, novels, poems, and plays have been written about this woman. This Moldovan Joan of Arc, who fought for what she considered to be freedom and justice, left a solid mark in his history of the Russian late Middle Ages and is still revered in her homeland in Mordovia. Well, I think that you would want to know her story. That's why I'm telling you in this video. She was not an Amazon. We had those in Eurasia, as you can see in my video that you can find the link to in the description to this one. Please do, because what you know about the Amazons goes mostly to the Greek legends, this and that. I want to tell you about others, including those who were fighting in Bohemia and those that lived in Russia and Central Asia. The world is big. It's not only about Western Europe and America. It's a wide world. Anyway, Alona had the soul of the Amazons. Thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support me, you'll find the links in the description to this video. Please like my video, subscribe to the channel, and tell others.